Revelation chapter 3 and verse 7 says this, "And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, the words of the Holy One, the true One, the one who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one opens." What an introduction there. Jesus is describing himself as that person. He says this to this church in the city of Philadelphia. "I know your works. Behold, I've set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. Behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. Behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you. Because you've kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world, to try those who dwell on the earth. I'm coming soon. Hold fast what you have, so that no one may seize your crown. The one who conquers, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. Never shall he go out of it. And I will write on him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which comes down from my God out of heaven, and on my own new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches." You can go to any size town in the United States of America today. You're going to see lots of churches in the towns. In this country, in our cities and towns and census-designated areas or villages, there are lots of churches. And if you were to drive through any mid-sized town, mid-size meaning 20 to 50,000, you were to drive through any town you've never been to before ever, and you drive through and you would notice a few things about the towns, but particularly if you were to make one round around town in a city you've never been to, there would be certain churches that stick out, that would catch your attention. In these towns, there's usually relatively few churches, between maybe 3 to 6-ish, that are large and prominent in the community. And each of these large and prominent churches are usually known for different things. For example, one would have a large Christian school. And everyone knows that church because of the Christian school. Perhaps another one has a large daycare, which is used by many in the community, right? Perhaps another one is known for their dynamic worship service, and all the young people in town, the college kids of the town, go there. It's where all the young people go, and that's what they're known for. That's their niche. You would be impressed by the size of the buildings, and these are the churches that have the prominent street corners and strategic places in the town that catch your eye, and it's like, whoa, that must be a good church. And of course, there's always a town that's really into the multi-site churches, this is their main church. Well, then you drive by, well, I already saw that. I thought that church, well, that's a different branch, and there's a satellite ministry here and there and there and there. And in every town, these churches are what we will call this morning alpha churches. They're the big name churches in every city and in every community. Now, cities have lots of churches, but there's relatively few alpha churches. These alpha churches are the pillars in the community. These are the churches that when people think of Christianity in this city, they can, even people, non-churchgoers can name these churches. They're at the top of the Google search every time. Their pastors are the ones who pray for the city council meetings. Many business owners attend these churches. And yet, when you pass through the town, you're impressed by these pillar alpha churches. But what you don't notice are the background churches in the town. The background churches are not the ones that catch your attention the first time driving through a town or even living in a town for a long time. You don't notice the churches that you pass in these little storefronts. You don't notice the churches with the relatively older buildings that maybe a street off or not in the best side of town. We'll call these background churches. These are smaller churches in the community that are not known for any one thing. These are the ones in the storefronts. They're the ones on the back streets. They have less impressive buildings. If you were to Google search, I did this morning, Google search, churches in Marion, Ohio, just right on Google. And I looked for Central Baptist Church. And I scrolled down. And I scrolled down. And I scrolled down. Then I had to click the button that says more results. And I clicked it. And I scrolled down. And I scrolled down. And I clicked more results again. Then I said, okay, fine. You know how sometimes if you search it, instead of doing it the old-fashioned way, every once in a while it'll provide a little list and a little map blurb, right? So I went back up and I said, okay, 20, boom, 20 churches. And they all had dots on the map. 1 through 10, don't see Central. Wasn't on there. Now, I'm sure we're on there somewhere. Well, we have a website, and that's accessible through Google, don't get me wrong. But we don't have a Christian school. We don't have a daycare. I think it's fair to categorize Central Baptist Church as a background church. I think that's fair. Now here's the question this morning. Can God be pleased with a background church? Or is God only pleased with alpha churches? Because if we're not careful, whether we realize it or not, the business model of church has crept so much into our society where we think bigger is better. Now, certainly there's nothing wrong with being an alpha church. I've attended alpha churches. There's nothing wrong with them. They are great. There's nothing wrong with being an alpha church. But does God only use alpha churches? Can he be pleased with a background church? Now, let's back up. We're going our way through through the 7 churches of Revelation. We're on church number 6, which is Philadelphia. The first church was Ephesus in Revelation 2. Ephesus was a huge church. Ephesus was the New York City of Bible times. Ephesus was an alpha church, no doubt. They had a well-oiled machine with their outreach. They were good, and they were stringent with their membership requirements, but they lacked love. But they were an alpha church. Then the next church was Smyrna. Smyrna was a poor church that was suffering persecution. They were a background church. Nowhere in the letter of Smyrna do you see a high influence in their community. That was a background church. Pergamum seems to have aspects of an alpha church and a background church, both to it. It's unique in that way. Thyatira was definitely an alpha church. Thyatira is a church that was large, so large they worshiped growth, and that growth was their goal, and they would not hold any of their members accountable. They had some wild church members that they couldn't hold accountable because they figured if we do that, we'll stunt church growth. We don't want to do that, remember? That was Thyatira. That's an alpha church. Sardis, what we looked at last week, had the reputation of being an alpha church. But in reality, it was a dead church. Now we're at Philadelphia. Look in verse 8. I know your works, he says to them. Behold, I've set before you an open door which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but little power. You think Philadelphia is an alpha church or a background church? It's a background church. Jesus is writing to Philadelphia and saying, I know you're not the most popular church. When people think of Philadelphia, they don't think of the church at Philadelphia. Philadelphia, of course, everyone here probably knows this. It's a compound word made up of two Greek words, phileo, one of the Greek words for love, and adelphos, one of the Greek words for brother, brotherly love, right? The city of brotherly love, Philadelphia. If you've attended Central for any amount of time, even if you haven't attended, if you've ever invited somebody to Central Baptist Church, you've probably had a conversation like this. Oh, what church do you go to again? Oh, Central Baptist Church. Oh, Central Baptist. Is that downtown? Well, it's not downtown. It's actually on the outside of town. We used to be kind of, central located. It's a long story. Okay, well, how do I get there? Where do you get? Well, do you know where that Scrappy's drive-through is? Yes, I do. The one. But no, not that Scrappy's. Never mind. Let's the mini golf place. You know Paradise Park? Yeah, I know Paradise Park, the mini golf place. Okay, so across the street from Paradise Park, there's that drive-through. Yes, yeah, that drive-through. Okay, that's the Scrappy's I'm talking about. Now, behind the Scrappy's, you kind of go down this little hill, and there's this rectangular brick building with a white steeple right in the middle. That's the church. That's Central Baptist Church. Y'all know what I'm talking about, don't you? You've had that conversation, right? It's a good conversation. We ought to have a lot of those. And if you're embracing the sent life, out telling others about Jesus, you've had that conversation. Sometimes when you have that conversation, someone will even ask, oh, so what's your church known for? Like, what's the niche in your church? You ever wonder that? Alpha churches have big niches, things they're known for. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. I've answered that question several times. And I've had to give an answer like this. Well, at Central Baptist Church, at our church, we really love Jesus. And I've gotten mixed results with that. I believe it's true. But some have been like, huh. Okay, like what else? I'm thinking, what do you mean, what else? We love Jesus. That's what it's all about. Now let me ask a question this morning. Is loving Jesus enough? That's really what it comes down to here. Do you need something else? Is there a desire and crave to have certain niches to be an alpha church, or can God be pleased with a background church that genuinely loves God and loves each other? What is a church that God is pleased with? Now, once again, there's nothing wrong with being an alpha church. But not every church is an alpha church, and that's okay. It's okay. A church can be weak in appearance and yet mighty in witness and can please God very much. Jesus is so pleased with this church here in Philadelphia that when he tells them, there's a specific formula that he uses. First is the Christ title. He describes himself. Here he describes himself in verse 7. He says, the angel of the church at Philadelphia write, the words of the Holy One, the true one, who has the key of David, who opens and no one shuts, and shuts and no one opens. What's talked about? He's starting a little picture there, a word picture, an analogy. Now, he says, the Holy One, the true one, the one who it's all about, right? Who has the key of David. That's a reference to many times in the book of Isaiah it's talked about. Now, the key, we know what a key is, don't we? If you have a key, you know what a key is, right? I meant to bring mine up here, but they're there. But you know what a key is. But that's not the kind of key it's talking about. We may know what a key is for us, but the kind of key that's here, throw that out the window. Look at Isaiah 22:22. I'll just read it. I have it here. It says, and I will place on his shoulder the key to the house of David. He shall open and no one will shut, and he shall shut, no one will open. Now, I've carried my keys a lot of times. I don't put my key on my shoulder. What kind of key is it? You see, back in this time, keys were different. They were not little handheld things that were portable. They were not things you can go to those little quick key things and boom, got another key. Great. There was usually only one, and they were very large, very large. They were not made to be portable. And whoever had that key had all the authority. That key talks about authority. Now, you can look at people in history. Martin Luther King. In fact, believe it or not, Adolf Hitler was actually given, in the 1930s, he was given the key to the city of Detroit. Scary. We have this thing of key when we recognize people, right? Martin Luther King received the key of several cities also. And it's a large key, but it's reminiscent of that ancient large key there, that honor. What does it mean? It means that God alone has the absolute authority right there. So he's introducing himself as saying, hey, I'm the one in charge. I have all the authority. I have the key to the house of David. I'm the one that'll open doors. I'm the one that'll shut doors, Jesus is saying. And then Jesus is so pleased with this church in Philadelphia that he actually keeps on interrupting himself. Have you ever heard somebody that is like so excited they're trying to tell you something but they can never say it because they constantly say other things? That happens all the time with me, by the way. You probably already know that. That's how, like, the writing style in verses 8 through verse 10. Look at verse 8. I know your works. Behold, I've set before you an open door. Well, great. What's the works? What's the works? He doesn't get to that really until verse 10. Look it down in verse 10. Because you have kept my word about patient endurance. That's the work, finally. So he interrupted himself there, right? He's so pleased with this church. He says, I know your works. That you have little power. You have little power. You're not an alpha church. But you've kept my word about patient endurance. But you've endured. So what's special about your church? Well, we love Jesus and we're really faithful and we love each other. And we do everything we can to tell other people about him. Is that enough for a church for God to be pleased with? You better believe it is. Yes, it is. That is the story of the church in Philadelphia, the testimony as it's laid out here in Revelation 3. You have but a little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. There are people in this church who knew they were going to suffer persecution if they told people about Christ and if they would not make meat sacrifice to idols and would not worship idols. If they confessed Jesus Christ alone, they were going to suffer for it. But their love for Jesus was so much, and it was such the main thing that drove their church. Their church never became an alpha church. It never became a mega church. Certainly there was possibly people in the church who had big aspirations to say, that'd be great if one day, but what if that day never happens? Is loving Jesus and loving each other enough? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. You can read through the alpha churches that are in the ones that I named from Revelation chapter 2, and the alpha churches have a lot of problems. Certainly they have advantages also, like Thyatira. He says, I know your love, your faith, your patience, your service. There's advantages also. But God is not just pleased with big churches. God is pleased with churches that are full of regular people that just love him. That's what pleases God. You have but little power, and yet you've kept my word and have not denied my name. He said, behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they're Jews of not, I'll make them come and bow down before your feet. It says, listen, these Jews are the ones that are persecuting them. They're trying to pressure them into denouncing Christ. They're working together in the Roman government to bring this persecution, just like they turned Jesus over to Pilate, remember, and said, hey, kill him. They're doing the same thing. They could have said, we're not very big in our town. We can just... We might as well just make that meat sacrifice to idols, and we might as well go down there, and that way we can just survive. No. They said, we love God too much to compromise. We love God too much to compromise. Jesus is so pleased with his church, he interjects 3 times and tells him what he's doing for them. So the answer is the first question. Is that enough to please God? Is just a church full of regular people who love Jesus and love each other, will that please God? Yes. Now there's a second question that's answered in this. Second question is this: will a church full of just regular people who loves God and loves each other, will God give them any ministry opportunities? Or does God only, because if we're not careful, we can think, well, these other churches, they just exist. But the real ministry happens at these alpha churches. You ever been tempted to think that? Ministry happens both places. It happens both. It happens in both. Look what he says. Behold, I have set before you an open door. Remember, he's the one that has the key to the house. He opens doors, he closes them. He says, I've set before you an open door which no one is able to shut. He says, you have a little power in your community, but I'm so proud of you that you are being so faithful. You love me. You're not compromising your doctrine. You're loving each other. I'm going to give your church some special ministry opportunities that are unique to you. And this principle cannot just be applied to churches, even though it's talking about a church, make no mistake. But a church is not the building. A church is not the organization. A church is made up of people. And have you ever felt like you are just such a normal person that God can't use you? God delights in using normal people to accomplish supernatural things. God delights in using you. He knows you have but little power. But God delights in doing great things through you because he loves to evidence himself through you. That's what this passage here is all about. This ministry opportunity, this door that's open to them. And if you read now, there's a couple tricky phrases in this passage. I'm not going to lie to you this morning. One of them is this. There are 2 major interpretations to this door that's open and shut. You can use, if you cross-reference it with Paul, every time he uses this phrase, a great and effectual door is open, he always talks about gospel multiplication, always talks about evangelism. Every single time Paul uses that phrase, an open door is in front. He always talks about advancing the gospel. But how John uses it in the book of Revelation is talking about not necessarily advancing the gospel, but he's talking about opening the door of heaven and having an eternal home. So there are 2 major interpretations to that phrase. I do not think it would be wrong to have both applications. Both are valid applications because both we see in the Bible several times. That God will open up doors of ministry opportunity, but yet the people who genuinely love Christ and remain faithful to him will have a home in heaven, and in that way their faith in Christ is evidenced. Because verse 10, actually, let's skip verse 9, let's go to verse 9. Behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. Behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, that they will learn that I have loved you. So He knows they're of little power. He's going to give them a ministry that's going to be so effective, people are going to confess the wrong there. And then verse 10, because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming to the whole world, to try those who dwell on the world. Chuck Swindoll said it this way: the size of a congregation, the limitations of its location, or the restrictions of its budget should never determine its vision. Instead, churches should set their vision based upon the power of God. That's what it's talking about here. I know you have little power, but I'm going to open a door for you. I'm going to open a door. Why? Because you've kept my word about patience, endurance. That phrase, patient endurance. What's so special about your church? Well, patient endurance. What does God praise in his church? What does he look for out of us? What does he expect out of us? He already knows that, obviously, we all know we're sinners. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. But he loves us so much, he sent Jesus to pay for our sin, that if we've confessed Christ and repent of our sin and acknowledge it and realize, God, I'm not in control of my future. I'm not the ultimate judge. You are. And I want to trust Christ to pay for my sin. He rose from the dead. There's a life in him. And what does he expect of you after that? After you've accepted Christ as your Savior, after you become a Christian? Love God. Love others. Endure patiently. Share Christ with others. All of those are applications that are drawn exactly from this text. There's a phrase that we have to answer also, another tough phrase here. I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world, to try those who dwell on the earth. I'm coming soon. Hold fast what you have. I will keep you from the hour of trial. What is that talking about? Although there are different interpretations of that also, I got to say that the hour of trial that is to come, that's coming upon the whole world, and we're in the book of Revelation, I believe that's one of the very beginning statements to the end times judgments. Now, what does it mean that he will keep us from the hour of trial? Successfully asked a question that no matter what I say is not going to please everybody in the room. Because the end times, the study of the end times, is something that when you look back in church history does not agree with itself. There are good people that come upon different interpretations of passages. Purpose of this series is not to dive deep in eschatology. We will one day, by the way. We will one day. But the purpose of this series is to go through the churches and ask ourselves, God, Jesus, if you were going to write a letter to our church, what would you write? What would you say about us? And what we can draw from this phrase today is that Jesus will reward those who patiently endure and love him and love others. That's why he says, hold fast what you have, that no one may seize your crown. The world at this time was driven by, the Olympics were around, they were driven by sports. There was actually a stadium in Philadelphia. In fact, if you've ever been to the city of Philadelphia, when you fly into the airport, it's right next to all the stadiums, the baseball stadium, the football stadium, they're all together in the city of Philadelphia, in America, at least today. It's kind of cool. But in this right here, that no one may seize your crown. What's a crown? It's talking about the wreath that the victors get in the games. When they got the crown, that's the reward. It's not necessarily talking about a literal crown in heaven. Is talking about, I'm going to have a reward for you. The one who conquers, that's Nike, the Nike Christian. The one who conquers, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. Here's the big contrast. From the introduction until now, Here's the big contrast. The big picture of the passage is this. To the one who conquers, listen, Jesus Christ is so pleased with this background church in Philadelphia that he says, keep doing what you're doing. Hold fast what you have. The Jews may kick you out of the synagogue, but I'm going to open the door of heaven for you. And you may have a little power on earth, but I'm going to make you a pillar in the temple of God in heaven. You may be unimportant on earth or see yourself as unimportant, but God will highly values you. And if this world doesn't value you, he does. And he does anyway, by the way. It says, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. So there's a contrast in this passage. Starts off as weak. You have a little power. And now he's saying, but if you continue to be faithful and hold fast what you have, I'm going to make your enemies that are oppressing you right now, they're going to bow down before you. And even though you have little power now, I'm going to make you a pillar in the temple of my God. He shall never go out of it, and I will write upon him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. There are many times when, probably 3 or 4 times of preaching through this series here on the 7 churches, I've been asked several different times, so which one do you think Central is like? If I got to be honest, we have to admit that God gave all 7 of these churches here because not one of these 7 fits the mold of any others. I think that inside of our hearts, there's a little Ephesus, there's a little Smyrna, there's a little Pergamum, there's a little Thyatira, there's a little Sardis, there's a little Philadelphia, and as we'll see next week, there's a little Laodicea. That's why God gave us all 7. I do, however, think that the church in Philadelphia is not an exception to Central Baptist Church. It may not be an alpha church. It may not be when people think of churches in Marion, we may not be number 1 on the Google search. But don't think that God is not pleased by people, regular people, genuine people, loving God, loving each other, sharing Christ with others, worshiping together, and growing together. If you want more out of a church, you may want too much. And if you don't have a community like that, if you don't have a community of believers, a support group, anything, consider joining Central Baptist Church. We're going to have a new members not orientation, but a class for prospective members on September 10th. We have the link live on our website. You can sign up for that. If you are here and you are unsure about your relationship with Jesus, you are missing out. You're missing out on all of the grace that God brings. You're missing out of the life in community. And there are some here that maybe are, well, I'm not missing out because I'm here. No, but maybe you're watching from afar. Maybe you're watching from afar. We have 4 steps to growth here at Central Baptist Church. Know, grow, follow, go. Know is make sure you know the Lord. A member of our church will gladly sit down with you, open the Bible, and share with you how you can know for a fact that heaven is your home and that your sins are forgiven. After that, the first step of obedience for a believer is being baptized, is baptism. Know, grow in your faith, follow Christ by becoming a member of Central Baptist Church. God desires this kind of community. He desires for Christians to thrive in a community like the church in Philadelphia. They love God, love each other. And before you know it, you won't have to be sent to go. You will naturally be telling others about Jesus Christ and intentionally starting relationships with a purpose of sharing Christ with them. And if you don't have friends that love the Lord, that can help you to grow, oh, you're missing out on the best life. you're missing out on Philadelphia then. You're missing out on brotherly love. So everybody here is on that growth scale somewhere. No, maybe you don't know the Lord. You can know him today. Maybe you need to grow in your faith and have to take the first step of obedience, which is baptism. Maybe you need to join a church. May not be central, that's okay. That's okay. We're not the only church in town. And there's other good ones. I know many of the pastors will be happy to talk to you about it. You want to find, well, I just don't think it's for me. It's okay. I'd love to find a church where you do fit in. But there's no such thing as a Lone Ranger Christian. And maybe you're already a member, your spiritual life is good, healthy. Maybe God has somebody for you, some activity for you to be involved in, to go and tell others about Christ. If that, then we can claim that verse in verse 11, hold fast what you have. I pray this morning as that central we would do just that. Let's pray.